Hi, everybody. This is Annie Montgomery. I am one of the Lifetime Arts trainers. I've been part of Lifetime Arts for a long time. And we are going to have a conversation today with Santos. She should be joining us very soon. I'm keeping an eye out for her. Hi, Greg. I see you there. Oh, and there's Rhynna. She's about to come on. Here we go. I'm going to welcome her now. Hello, Rhynna. Are you in? Look at all these folks coming on to say hi. Hi, Jason. There she is.
Hey,
Hi,
Annie.
Jackie. Hi, Julie. Hi, Galia. There is everybody coming in live. I love it. How you doing,
I'm
Rhynna?
doing good. This is excellent to be able to have this conversation with you through
I
Instagram
know
Live. This is wonderful.
it's a first for us, right? We're like we're mastering up on our skills here today, aren't we?
Absolutely. That's what we do.
So listen, today we're just talking about teaching artists and the importance of teaching artists and creative aging and what that's all about. But what's funny is you and we've known each other, I don't know, for 8, 9 years now. Has it been that long?
I think
Maybe not quite that long,
I
but I thought maybe you could talk about how we first met.
well I was so lucky to meet you when I first started working for the Bronx Senior Photo League, which is the program I created at the Bronx Documentary Center, and Lifetime Arts came in for a training, which was a very unique training because I was the only person in that training. So you and I had a whole week of being able to be together, and I was just so impressed, by you and all of your knowledge, and also being the first person to talk about issues that I was going through in the classroom and, dealing with older adult education. I never had that opportunity to talk with another artist about that, so I felt incredibly privileged to have had that time with you.
Oh, me too. I mean, I look back at that it wasn't really a training. It was a pure learning opportunity, really, where we shared our stories and we talked about what was working, what was not working, what challenges we had, everything that we were learning on this journey together in our years of experience of working and teaching older adults and becoming partners with them. And I just really valued that relationship. At the beginning of our friendship, really years back. So it's great. Years later, here we are, both trainers at Lifetime Arts. And I know you're still growing every day in your work with older adults. What do you feel like the role of teaching artists really plays in creative aging?
Well, I think it really centers on the teaching artist. I think the teaching artist has to have, first of all, a love for that community, a love for older adults, and being able to see, how magical this and important this community is. Their role really is to introduce a new art form to these students, but to do it in a way that the art form is accessible, to really be able to be flexible and respond to the students, history, community, where they are, and be able to bring whatever art form, for me is digital photography, and make it relevant for the student. And I think one of the most important parts is to really be an advocate for older adults, to talk about ageism, and how ageism really hinders the lives of older people in our country, and how also you're having these students come in with those experiences and trying to address them as best as possible. But really, our role as teaching artists is to make, accessible art fun, and for it to really be engaging, and for older adults to see how incredible they have and so much that they have to offer their communities.
Absolutely. Totally agree on all of that. I really found being a teaching artist in creative aging in terms of the partnership with my older adults
Mm-hmm.
to probably be the thing that I have learned along the way is the most valuable piece of it, where, in other circumstances when I teach, um, I kind of come in as sort of, and I mean this in a good way, but really as the leader and the shaper, and there's a bit of a hierarchy, whether I want there to be or not, because
Mhm.
often I'm teaching younger students, and I'm sort of in charge, you know. And it's not that I don't come in with a plan, but I find with my older adult students such a different relationship to the design of the
Mm.
class, because I certainly come in with a plan, but I am constantly beginning to shape it in new ways with my students, based on their impact and based on their input and based on what they want and what they need and what their interests are. And I think that sort of duality of teacher and peer and artist maker along with the students, is a whole different kind of teaching and class and experience. And I hope that it instills a real sense of agency in my older adult learners,
Mhm.
and a real sense of um, you know, validation around the fact that I'm learning with them. I'm not the expert. We're we're learning and growing as artists together. And to me, that's always been such a difference in creative aging work, as compared to other work. And I also think maybe why it has such a strong impact. Because, you know, I'm also learning and I'm also, you know, growing my art with my students, and they see that we're one and the same. We're not different from one another in that way.
Exactly. Exactly. You know, and that really allows students, especially students that, you know, might have a resistance to learning something new or might feel intimidated. You know, photography is really technical,
Sure.
so we do a lot of learning to get them ready to really create work. And so really being able, I love to model, I have to show, you know, not just, you know, the beautiful images I've made, but also, you know, the images that weren't as successful. And that really being able to have that level of kinship with my students really allows them and gives them the freedom to be free. And I don't say mistakes because you can't make a mistake in art, but you know, to stumble or, you know, to be open to learning new things. So I definitely agree. And I've also enjoyed a classroom like you, of where it's a more equal back and forth relationship with the students.
Yeah, it's really cool. One of the things, you know, we both are now working as lifetime arts trainers, and sort of codifying some of the work
Mhm.
that we do, and what we've seen over the years. We've developed our principles working with teaching artists, and really based on sort of good teaching, andrological principles, you know, teaching adult principles. But what are some of the principles that we kind of talk about with our teaching artists when we train them, that really show up in your work? And maybe there's a specific story in regards to older adults, or you're an older adult student where you've really seen that principle in action.
Well, one, I just felt so privileged to have been able to work with Lifetime Arts to really get this level of support for a teaching artist and the environment of older adults education, and really validating a lot of what I did, you know, already did, and really encouraging me to even be more prepared. One of the first things, you know, the principles was, how do you enter a space? How do you enter a new space? And being able to talk about the level of preparation that really needs to be put in there. Um, who do you have to win over? Who has to be on your side to ensure that your program is successful? What community are you walking into? Really being able to do your research about that. What do they want to learn? What are their needs? Kind of things. And but more importantly for me has been the safe planning methodology that Lifetime Arts teaches. And one of the things that I love about the safe planning, which is skills, you know, assessment, feedback, and social engagement, is the social engagement aspect. It really encouraged me to try to create as much communication and talking within a classroom with students to really create that classroom community that it needs to happen for it to really be strong. And one time, this is when I knew the class was really picking up and really successful. If anyone who's taught in at senior centers knows that the hierarchy is that bingo is first and everything is second and last. And so we would have, the bingo was happening at the same time as a class. So, I had a small amount of students, but very quickly my class was full. And my students actually were telling the bingo participants to quiet down, that they were being sad because the class was going on. And I remember feeling so incredibly successful, because I know that when your class is more popular than bingo, you are doing something so right. And I think students really had my back when it came to that, but they really found that connection so important.
Sure.
Probably a connect, what they were looking for, the socialization in bingo, but also maximizing that with learning something that they could use.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, I think about the safe planning principles. It's funny. Those were sort of developed, from teaching in creative aging and back to teaching. And now I use my safe planning principles in every place I
That's
teach. But it's just a simple sort of touchstone for me. But anyway, one thing that I really find to be the most sort of uh, useful piece sometimes is the assessment piece. Is really touching in on what each student needs individually, and how do you assess that, how do you make adjustments for that. And I always think of my student, hi Brett. He's passed away now, but he was a student of mine for many years, and then I kept in touch with him in that group for many years. But anyway, he came into my storytelling class as a very prolific published writer, writing for like the New York Times and New York Magazine. And I'm like, oh my gosh, and I'm teaching him. Oh my, what am I going to teach him? And through the assessment, he really was there to teach me, honestly, about structure and writing and detail and senses. I mean, he was extraordinary. He taught all of us so much. But what he needed was to be heard, right? He was really looking to be engaged into his 90s. He's my student between the age, I think, of 89 and 83, or 89 and 93. And he was really looking, because he was feeling so isolated and he wasn't working professionally anymore. So he was really looking, my assessment of him was that the story needed to be heard out loud, and he needed to hear feedback because he wasn't receiving it professionally. So I would make sure that in every class, we had a couple of minutes, 20 minutes or so, where they could work in pairs. Because if I had everyone reading, only one or two people would go per class, right? But if I put everybody into pairs, gave him some curated sort of feedback prompts, I could be heard every week. And that's what he really needed. And that kept him coming back. And he didn't, I really had nothing to teach him. He was an expert, way, way, way above what anything I could teach him. But he needed his work to be heard. And so I just tried to find ways to make sure that happened. We're almost out of time. So what I want to get to, though, before we close, is this idea of, and I think you and I are a great example of this, right? We came together to train one another, really, right? We're peer-to-peer learning. We're learning in partnership. We're learning through our sharing and our experience. And what do you think, how does Lifetime Arts do that in a way that's unique to make training accessible to teaching artists out there? And how do we sort of share and spread that love amongst other teaching artists across the country doing this work?
Well, first of all, I think Lifetime Art is incredibly unique within the entire country of the kind of work that they're doing, the kind of advocacy that they're doing for older adults education. If, we've all learned, during the COVID pandemic, incredibly well, how important it is to be able to, the impact of education of older adults, to be able to create a level of connection. And for many older adults, that, are are isolated. And one thing that Lifetime Arts does is, especially specifically in the training for other teaching artists, really push the importance of accessibility, and how these classes and these programs really need to be accessible to for all different types of students from all walks of life, including, people of color, immigrants, students that are LGBTQIA plus. And I think that type of work of wanting to create this level of inclusion and also respect, for the life and the experience of these students is very unique to Lifetime Arts and the type of training that they actually do.
Yeah, and I think that that speaks to how we want to work with our teaching artists too, right? We want to keep our practices inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
So all artists from all walks of life, from all parts of the country can do this work, and it might look different in every little place across the way. Some folks are doing 3 classes, some folks are doing 8, some are using our safe principles and drop-in programming, teaching us new principles, right? Like our trainings are really about, like you and I have done, sharing our resources, learning from one another, and growing and being adaptive to what our older adults need. And every community is going to be a little bit different in their approach. And that's micro communities. One library will do it differently than the senior center down the street, then we'll do it differently than the assisted living, that will do it differently than the YMCA, all within a 2-mile radius. And it's all good work. And it's just, how do we keep sharing, what we're learning together, and sharing our resources and being as equitable as possible with our sort of creativity, our knowledge, and our
Yeah,
resources.
and that's how come, what I love about being a facilitator for Lifetime Arts is that, Lifetime Arts is teaching flexibility. What are you dealing with? And these are the tools that we can give you to be able to deal with all of the
Yeah,
different things that might come up. And I really do love that, because when you're dealing with all of these different type of environments, things are going to come up. And so,
absolutely.
have a box full of tools on how to deal with that.
Well, Rhynna, it has been so great to see you and talk with you on Instagram Live. Who knew I could be so tech savvy? and you too. We just, although you're more experienced at this than I am, so I'm learning from you constantly. I remember quite a few projectors you helped me set up back in the day. Well, listen, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ryan. I'm going to do an official sort of thank you before we go, but it's great to see you, pal, and we'll be in touch very
Absolutely.
soon.
Thank you so much.
And thank everybody out there in the internet world for joining this stream today. This conversation is part of Lifetime Arts If Not Now When campaign, dedicated to making arts education opportunities accessible and affordable for all. And you out there in the internet, if you're listening, you can help us make this goal possible for more teaching artists by donating today. Help us spread the teaching and the training and the peer learning out there to the whole of the United States and the world. And just click the link in the Lifetime Arts bio or visit lifetimearts.org to give now. And thank you so much for your continued support. We appreciate all of you, and thanks for joining us today on this live stream. And be well and have a great week. Thanks, Rhynna.
Thank you, Annie. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.